Your respective teachers and the students as well. Today is very special assembly. We wanted to introduce you to guests here who are the oldest citizen in this area, especially Cann area. And the lady Vi Gosling and the gentleman Mr. David Hacker, they're a good friend of us, good friend of the masjid as well, and they're community activists in this area. Why we call them in this gathering? Because we want our children, our students and our teachers to know those two lady and the gentleman, and also briefly they will give a historical talk of this area, Cann Hall, how the Cann Hall was and why the name Cann Hall in this area especially. And they will, I think, give some historical talk about this building as well. And we think our children should know the history of this building, history of this Cann Hall area, so they will be more loving, more caring of this area, inshallah. So let me ask Vi Gosling to, do you want to start off now, or do you want David Hacker to
I
start?
don't mind, whichever you prefer. Okay, I'll start.
Okay, you start.
Can you hear me all?
Those that can't hear, please put their hands up.
Can everybody hear? I don't know whether answering or not.
Yes,
Anyway, as you will gather from Shafi, I'm Vi, and I'm known locally in Leytonstone throughout as Vi, because I've been here an awful long time. In 3 years' time, I shall be 100 years old. So I'm a piece of your local history. Yeah, that's true. And so, first of all, I want to thank Shafi and you all for inviting me here today. It's a very special privilege to be at your meeting, and I think particularly to be with young people. Now, Shafi told me that there are people here from the age of 7 to the age of 14. So that I get an idea, could the 7s to 10s put their hands up? Thank you. And could the 10s to 14s put their hands up, or 11s to 14s? Thank you, thank you. Then you see, I won't say too silly things to the younger or to the older. I'm trying to be a little bit sensible, and I'm very glad to be here. Now, to talk about the history, I don't know how far you live away. Do they all live fairly near, Shafi?
Yes, they are.
Very near. So Cann Hall Road is part of your daily scene, is it? Cann Hall Road, yeah. And, well, Cann Hall Road is very much the same as it was when I was a child. Can you believe that? Nearly 100 years old. Well, 96 and a half to be accurate. It's very much the same, because on the corner of Selby Road, there's still a baker's on one corner, and on the other corner there's a grocer's. Used to be the co-op. There's still a grocer's and a baker's there. There is still David's Church up here on the left, the Cann Hall Baptist Church. There are still 2 or 3 pockets of shops, one just a little way down there, 1 or 2 down the road further, going towards the flats. So the street is very much the same, except this building has changed, and you now have come here and given it new life. Is that good? You're giving it new life, and you're bringing new life to the district. So we are very glad to see you, but do you know what I really want? I really want to know you. So I hope when I finish talking that you may ask a few questions and we can understand one another a little bit more. Anyway, to go on about Cann Hall Road, it's very much the same, but it's interesting because it leads down to Wanstead Flats. And do you know that Wanstead Flats is part of Epping Forest?
Yes.
You do? And that we have a great forest, goes up 18 miles into Essex. Epping Forest, absolutely wonderful. And in my childhood, we didn't have handheld technology like you do. We used to go and find places and see places. I expect you do now. But handheld technology rather keeps you sitting down, looking, listening, and it was very different when I was young. You had to move, you had to walk, you had to travel. And so, from here, to start with, you would travel across Wanstead Flats, into Wanstead Park, which is a magnificent park, and then on into the big forest. You know Bush Wood, do you?
Yeah.
Do you know Bush Wood?
Yeah.
Well, the forest, that's like a small bit of real forest. How many of you really know Epping Forest? You do, good, fine, that's fine. So that was part of our activity. And on the flats, there was always a big fair at Easter time and August bank holiday, which there has been at Easter, with merry-go-rounds and sideshows and shops and things like that. There was one this Easter. I don't know whether you're interested in those, are you? No? Are you? Yeah, you are. Somebody's nodding, that's good. That's good, fine. Somebody's nodding. So you know what I'm talking about. And the little pond that they've rebuilt up there wasn't like it is now. It was smaller with a concrete edge, stone edge, and it was just used for people like yourselves to sail their boats on. So there wasn't any of that big surround. It was a sailing boat for children to use their model boats on. Anyway, that covers the flats. Now, going to other things, in the district we had lots of good things. We had, first of all, a wonderful old library. Then in the 30s, a wonderful new library was built in Leytonstone, and we had a very special man who was the borough librarian, and he turned that library into a powerhouse, or what you might call a small university, because it was teeming with activity every day and every evening. That was the Leytonstone Library. Did you want us? You put your hand up there, I thought you wanted. And so we were fortunate in that we had libraries. We also had a football team here, a well-established Leytonstone Football Club, FC, and that was behind the high road up by the Midland Railway. That was a very flourishing club for many years, so we had that activity. Over at Leyton, we had the County Cricket Club, which is now the sports field, and there you could see the absolute cream of cricket. All the county matches used to take place there, and you could see the cream of cricket players from the country and abroad. I remember seeing, I think he played for Worcestershire, was the Nawab of Patodi. And does that ring a bell with anybody?
Nawab Ali Khan Patodi?
Pardon?
Nawab Ali Khan Patodi.
Yes.
Indian
And that was another wonderful thing we went to. I used to go with my brother because he was older than me, and when he went in the main gate I had to go around the side to get a cheap ticket, you know, but there a bit of fun. Then again, as you go down Cann Road this way, you come to the Leytonstone High Road, and that quite busy shopping centres, shopping all the way up to Leytonstone. And Leytonstone Shopping Centre at the top, by the church and the Green Man, used to be quite classy. Do you know what I mean by that? You do. It was quite classy. Rather elegant shops. It's not really the same now, but it was then. Now, if you go the other way to Stratford, you've got a very busy marketing place which had excellent shops of different categories, you know, for the working class, for the middle class and for the posh. But also it had other things. It had 3 theatres. There was the Borough Theatre, which used to put on classical plays, Shakespeare, and a wonderful pantomime at Christmas. There was the Empire Theatre, that was a variety house. There was the Theatre Royal, which still exists. Have you heard of the Theatre Royal? You know of it? Have you been to it? Well, that again puts on all contemporary plays now and some old ones. But that had a marvellous history because it reopened after a silent period for many years. And at one time it used to be known as the Blood Pit because it was there were coarse plays and things like that. But when it reopened, it started like a London theatre with a number of actors and actresses who came from the London stage and performed there. But after a few years, it was taken on by a wonderful woman who turned it into the theatre that it is to do now. And she's part of the local Stratford legend. So we had all that we could go to. And then again, the beauty of being in Leytonstone was that we had all of London within a short train journey. You could go to the British Museum, the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum, all of that kind of thing. And that was, we used to go out. I don't know, do you go a lot to these places? You do? Do you? You don't? No, well, you will. You will. And so we travelled, even when I remember going to the British Museum when I was 7, and I found one of the things which has influenced me all my life, and it's called the Rosetta Stone, and it was a famous stone found in Egypt, and on it gives you the translation of hieroglyphics. You know the hieroglyphics? And it was the translation, it was the key to understanding hieroglyphics. That stone is in 3 languages and it's in the British Museum. And the last time I went to the British Museum, about 3 years ago, I was horrified because it used to just stand on a little table and you could look at it. You didn't touch it because you don't touch museum exhibits, but you could look at it as closely as I'm looking at you, and you could see it really intensely, like your own hand. And now they've put it in a case, and that, to me, is wrong. I love the sense of being able to not touch them, but to be near them. You get the feel of it, you know what I mean? So, going to places like that was all part of our normal practice and habit and part of our education. So what else can I tell you? Is that, just let me look. Something I didn't mention. When I talked about the church along here, then there are 2 other big churches. There's St Margaret's, which you probably know of, just the other side of the road, and one at the back here, there used to be a St Columba's. But they had marvellous groups of young people attached to them. The Baptist Church had what was called the Boys' Brigade and the Girls' Brigade, and they still exist. And they were groups who did all sorts of marvellous things and went camping and that kind of thing. And they used to also take examinations and get badges which they sewed on their uniforms. And the same with Boy Scouts and Girl Guides. And they would do all kinds of things like knot tying and all sorts of activities that were skills which they were adding to their normal habits through being members of these groups. And because of that, and then they would get badges which would show people what their qualifications were on their sleeves. So I just mentioned that because they were young people like you are young people, and they were all living around here. Just bear with me a moment. And about transport, do you know what used to go down Cann Hall Road? Not trolley buses. What?
Trains.
I can't hear you.
Trains, he said.
Trams?
Train.
No.
We're nearly there.
Trams. You knew, did you? Trams. And these were funny old primitive constructions of iron and steel. And the one that went down Cann Hall Road was yellow and green. 2 stories. There were rails in the road that it went on and electrical connections overhead. And both upstairs, both ends of the tram, rounded ends, were open. So if you went upstairs, you could sit in the open at both ends. And the driver was in the open, and the conductor at the back on the ground floor was in the open. So that was the trams, they were the trams that went down here. And I've talked about that. I think I haven't mentioned the swimming baths. Swimming was a very popular occupation, and in Cadhall Road, which is off the high road, there were swimming baths there, and there are swimming baths there now, but not the old ones. The old ones went and they built new ones. And of course, schools used to take group swimming and that kind of thing. Then that takes me back to schools, because this has changed here in Cann Hall Road. The what's the name of the one that, tell me the name of the school. No. Tell me that. No, I'm trying to think of it. What's the name of the woman it's named after?
Jenny Hammond.
Jenny Hammond. The Jenny Hammond School. Now that used to be the boys' school, because there were twin schools. In the front playground on the road, there was the girls' and the infants' school, and that was where I went at the age of 5 until 10, when I won a scholarship and I went to a school in West Ham. And that was a grief to me, because I wanted to go to the high school in Leytonstone, where I'd taken the examinations and the oral examination. But because I lived near the boundary, they sent me to West Ham, but never mind. So that was just one of the things about schools. But that school was knocked down a few years ago, and we just had the Jenny Hammond. And then, of course, there used to be another big school in Trumpington Road. But then the Tom Hood School, which is now the Buxton, developed, and that became the Buxton later on. And Cann Hall School vanished and became part of Buxton. Anyway, I think that's covering the main features of the history actually the roads don't look very much different. The only thing that looks very different are the trees in the roads, but the roads and the houses look very much the same. So in 100 years, you are inheriting something which has worn nearly 100 years of use and still looks pretty, acceptable. So I hope that your life here is going to be good. It'll be different because everybody's got televisions. We didn't have televisions in the early days. I think it was about in the 1960s we got televisions. We had radios before that. But now you've all got... Do you have all these handheld things? Now one day you'll have to give me a talk on them so that I know more about them, because I don't. I can't be bothered now. It takes me all my time doing the ordinary things. But I would like to know. I recently got a little book in my newspaper about apps. What does apps mean? Hmm? Yeah. What are they? I can't hear.
I still can't hear, sorry, can you...
Applications.
I'm sorry, it's my head.
Applications.
Applications. Well, I've got this book of apps, and I read it today to see if it would help me with the talk, because I thought it would be your language. But do you have lots of apps?
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
You can have them for everything, can't you? I was amazed. Food, travel, absolutely everything under the sun. So this is the big change. I've come to talk about history, but I think I'm at the point when you ought to give me a talk about your history. So shall we finish there? If you want to ask any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. And I hope you could all hear me. Is that all right,
I
Shafi?
have questions.
Yes, Shafi.
This building has been built up in 1885.
Yes.
So before 1885,
This was farmland.
it was a farmland. Nobody was living there.
That was all green. It was all green. And I think before that, in some parts of this area, there were a number of allotments, weren't there? A lot of allotments growing food.
There wasn't any houses and anything before 1885.
Well, there were one or two, obviously, because the farmer had to have a house.
Yes.
And
yes.
there were two farmers, Mr. Colgrave.
There you are.
This place was called the Colgrave Public House. He built that in 1885. And then Mr. Lake. You've heard of Lake House Road? Yes. You've heard of Colgrave Road? Yes. Well, there's Colgrave Road just down the road, but this is the Colgrave pub. Mr. Colgrave built the pub for people to get together and have drinks. And that went on, as Vi said, until a few years ago when it was sold and it became empty. And what is the good thing about that is that Shafi and a group of people in this area decided to go for it, bid for it, and as a result, the building here is as it was in well, it's obviously been slightly modified, but outside it is virtually the same as it was in 1885. 2 years later, Mr. Lake provided a facility for Christians who worked for him to have a place of worship, just as Shafi and group have provided you with a facility to worship as Muslims and Islam. And that was in 1887, 2 years after this building was built. But I'll talk about that in a moment, if I may, but that's the principle upon which these two buildings still exist after 2 world wars. So you are in a bit of history.
Yeah, we are the oldest building in this area.
You are? 1885, 1985, what's that?
I think my house is about 1888.
Yes, most of the houses in this area were built, except those, if you go down a road and you see 2 houses where there used to be 3 and they're red brick, They were houses that were built after the war because there were bombs which knocked out the houses in the middle.
Yes, you can recognise that in many roads. You'll see two like flat-fronted red brick houses, as different from we call our roads, they are terraces because they run symmetrically along.
Shall we take some questions?
Yes,
Well, come on, there's a question from that gentleman over there.
Yes, come on.
I can't.
You'll have to.
No problem.
Was he in the World War?
Sorry?
Was he in the war?
World
War, yeah.
Yeah. He's asking was it World War Second or the first one?
I was
Both.
I was born during the First World War in 1917, and I lived here apart from a couple of months when I went to my brother's in Hertfordshire after the Blitz. I lived here throughout the war, and I worked in North Woolwich, and I used to do ARP duty in the factory at North Woolwich on the river.
And what is ARP, please, Vi?
Oh, you tell me.
It's assistance, I think, in the war effort, basically
Yeah.
providing facilities.
Protection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I forgot to mention, she has been given MBE 2009.
2009. But they don't know what that is.
I think she's forgotten.
Do you know what MB is? The Queen or the King, whoever is in charge, can give honours to people, like Sir somebody something, and that kind of thing. And then lower down the ranks, you've got an order called the OBE, the Order of the British Empire. Then there's a lower category called the MBE, and I got that in 2009 for my work in the community, because I've worked in many groups in the borough.
What Vi hasn't told you is that she and other councillors way back 60 years ago were instrumental in having a branch library built at Harrow Green. Now, if you go up to Harrow Green and look on the side of the building opposite the War Memorial, you'll see it still says Harrow Green Branch Library. Now, that lasted for 60 years, and Vi and the councillors at that time were instrumental in getting that branch library opened. Unfortunately, the council decided that they couldn't afford it, and so they closed two libraries, one in, I think it's Walthamstow or Chingford, and the Cann Hall one, the Harrow Green one. Now, there are efforts going on still to get that open, but at the moment there is only a community library. But for 60 years, that library was open for you to go along. It had computers in it up till it closed, so it provided a service for people closer to you than the Leytonstone Library.
And I went to the council chamber when they were making the decision to close that library, and I appealed for it to be used particularly for work with young people, because there was lots of accommodation there, lots of equipment. There was the library, but there were rooms, and it would have been a wonderful developmental centre. And what angers me is that from that point there is a huge wedge of the borough that comes over here, goes to Forest Gate, goes to the boundaries of Stratford, and it hasn't got a library in it now, apart from the voluntary library across the High Road.
The other thing that Vi hasn't told you is that, and it's quite important, none of you, of course, have got the right to vote yet, but when you get to 18, it may be 16 by the time you're at that age, you'll have the right to vote. Now, this lady was a councillor, I think, was it Cattle Ward? But
Yes.
it may not have been called
Yes,
Cattle
yes,
Ward
it
for a
was.
number of years.
Yes.
So you're actually seeing part of government, and you're seeing a lady who's been in government in local elections, and of course your mums and dads will have the right to vote on the 22nd of May in local elections. Now, you can go back and say, look, I've just seen a lady who's X years old, and she was a councillor working for this area. Try and encourage them to vote. I'm not telling you what to vote, but please encourage them to vote. It's important.
Well, everything that you get around you, not everything, but nearly everything, depends on what they decide. And I think they've decided to charge you, Shafi, haven't they? A big sum, the council.
Yes,
Yeah, which I think is totally wrong. But you should, your parents should at least be interested and take an interest, because your future is at stake here and what happens in the borough. And we just don't want fireworks, we want other things. Yes, would you...
Are you only popular in Cann?
Sorry?
Are you only popular in Cann?
What did it say?
What was the question? Sorry.
Are you only popular at Cann Hall?
I've worked across the borough. I've founded quite a few organisations in the borough. One, when I was a councillor, was the Waltham Forest Drama Festival, which is still going. And then in 1972, I founded the Civic Society, which deals with higher things than local level, but to deal with the welfare of people and towns and places. That was the Civic Society. I've also founded the Leytonstone Festival, which is now in its 22nd year in this part of Leytonstone and up to down here. Your church used to take part in the Leytonstone Festival, and you should, Shafi, you should think about that, putting something into the Leytonstone Festival.
Yeah, we will do next year.
It's too late this year, but next year you should do. And then the last thing I did, which is about 20 years ago, we decided that in the borough that art was being neglected in schools. So I brought a group into being which is called Arts in Education. It's a voluntary organisation, but the council has supported it, and that is still running, and that ensures that there are special tutors in schools, maybe artists, dancers, actors, that kind of thing, who go into schools. They put on performances and arrange all kinds of activities. So I've had a hand in forming the nature of the borough. So I'm not just known, and I was on the Waltham Forest Council not as an elected, after I finished on Leyton at the end when the three boroughs amalgamated in 1965 and became a Greater London borough. And after that, I worked in Walthamstow and was chair of the Arts Council of Waltham Forest for 25, 30 years, something like that. So I've been working with all of those people and for the common good over the borough. So it's not just Leytonstone.
Also, can I mention one thing to all the teachers and students as well? Mr. David Hecker, Y. Gosling, when we bought this building in 2010, we had big difficulties to get the permissions, and also the local non-Muslims community, some of them, not all of them, or 10% of them, they were against the mosque. They didn't want to be this one as a mosque. And Vi Gosling and David Hecker, from the day one, they're supporting us to make this building as a mosque. Not only this, David Hecker, Vi Gosling, they have written letters, they have spoken to the councillors, especially David Hecker went with us to the planning committee, he raised his voice, and he openly said, I want a mosque here. There is 4 churches are serving the Christian community. There is any mosque there to serve a Muslim community, so I want a mosque there. So this is for us today to show you the 2 men and women who supported the mosque. They are not Muslims, they are non-Muslims, which is a bit encouraging for me when we first got hand of this building to turn into a mosque. And David Hacker always inspiring us to do the community activities and other stuff as well. So I think for today it's a bit honor for us to ask them here and address to you.
There's another gentleman with a question.
Yes.
Have you lived there all your life?
Repeat the question.
Have you lived here all your life?
I was born in the house I live in.
He's 70 Chinese Road. She born there. So when it was 1917. 1917.
We've got any questions from the ladies.
Any questions from the ladies?
You're at liberty to ask questions. Come on, girls. No? They're all shy. Can I suggest that if having... Oh, we'll come back to you in a moment. If you come up with some thoughts after this meeting, put them down, dots on a piece of paper, jot them down on a bit of paper, give it a shuffle, and then let us have the questions and we'll answer them afterwards. How about that?
Yes.
That means it's an ongoing conversation.
Yes, Casey.
And what schools did you attend?
What did you want to ask?
What school did you attend?
Cann Hall Road. I went to the Cann Hall Infants School and Girls School, which was in front of the one that's there now. And then I won a scholarship, an Essex scholarship, because we weren't a Greater London borough then. This was all under Essex. My early prizes have got the County of Essex on the label inside. And then they sent me to the West Ham High School in Stratford because I was living near the boundary, which grieved me very much. I wanted to go to Leytonstone where I took the examination and the oral, but I went to Stratford, and that was another historic. That was founded by a woman way, way back as a simple little school which developed into a grammar school. Another history.
When you were at school, did the teachers have sticks? And if you were naughty, did they hit it? Would they hit you?
Shafi.
When you was in the school,
Um,
was there any sticks when you was in the school?
Any what?
Sticks.
Hit with a stick.
Sticks.
When you did wrong, did some of the teachers,
Oh,
you
yeah.
did the headmaster have a cane?
I've never seen one.
Oh, well, I have. If I may, since Vi has never seen one, I've never had the cane, which used to be a cane, a rod on your rump. But I did have a teacher, and she was, I think she was Burmese, I'm not sure, and she used a ruler, and you had to put your hands over your mouth or something like that, and she used to whack you with the ruler, and it hurt, it stung. Now that was when I was at school, it doesn't happen now, but basically it didn't do me any harm, I'm still here, but it was something which very few of you would know about, but this was a principle which was allowed in that school at that time, and if you did something really wrong, you went along to the headmaster or the headmistress, as they were called in those days, and if it was sufficiently bad, they would say, or either hold out your hand, and a stick would be, a rod would be put across your hand, or on your rump. And that applied to, I'm sorry to say, applied to ladies as well as gentlemen. Men, as well as boys.
Some ladies, but not others. But you may have noticed from what I've told you, what I've done, that I'm interested very much in the arts and writing and poetry and all that kind of thing. And I don't know who wrote the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Do you know? You don't know. Never mind. But what I was going to say... Sorry.
Say yes.
How old are you?
What does he say?
Said, how old are you?
I am 96.
That's 9 times older than most of you.
But not here. I can't walk very easily because I've got that awful osteoarthritis all over me. But I'm still terribly interested. And when we talked about handheld technology, what I do like is BBC4. There are wonderful programs about science and history and music and the universe and that kind of thing. And I just wallow in all of that. I read a bit, not so much as I used to, but reading is very important. Do you read much? You read a lot? Well, tell me, who reads a lot? You do? What do you read? What kind of books do you read? Tell me. What's he saying, Shaggy?
He reads history books.
History? What kind of history? When?
The Great Fire of London.
Gosh. That interests you, does it? Have you been to see where it started and where it ended?
He started in a bakery.
That's right. You can go into London and see where it started. Near the monument. The big tall monument. Yes. Come on, tell me what you said. I want to know. What's he saying?
I missed it. It's fine.
He missed what you said.
Say it again. Can you repeat what you were saying?
He's saying it's spread all over the place.
By a baker, yeah?
Oh, for the Fire of London. That's right, yes. I'm sorry.
King wasn't doing anything.
Who wasn't?
King.
Didn't he help?
No.
That's not good, is it? He should have known better. Perhaps he was away.
Oh, these guys have had a lot of
Oh,
questions.
come on. What? Come and tell
Yes,
me.
is there?
Tell me.
In your childhood, did you have any illnesses?
Yes. I had, just after I'd left Cann School, got a scholarship and went to Stratford, West Ham. I think in my first year there, I got chicken pox, and it made me very ill. I lost half a term. It does sometimes when you're a bit older. And the worst of that was that I was removed from the chemistry section of education there and put in the botany class, which was quite interesting because I still love plants, and as David knows, I play about a lot with plants, take cuttings and all that kind of thing. But that affected me then. That was when I was a child. Yeah. And I just wanted to mention one thing. When I said that I've always been interested in the arts, I don't know whether you know that we have had some very famous names in Leytonstone. And one of our most famous actors at the moment is Sir Derek Jacobi. And he was born in Essex Road, that's at the top of Leytonstone, and he went to the boys' school in Essex Road, and he was knighted, and he is one of our great all-round actors. And he's just published a book, and it's rather interesting. He doesn't praise himself. Subtitle is "As Luck Would Have It." What he meant was that things went his way. And the other one is John Lill. one of our foremost pianists who went to the same school in Leytonstone. So we have produced, and other people, but I just mentioned those two. Any other questions? Or have you reached your time? There's one at the end here.
That's the last question we take. Yes, I know.
At the end of the fire of London, 6 people died.
The Great Fire of London, 6 people have died.
More than that.
I thought it was more, but I don't know.
I think it was a lot more than that.
Let me look. There's another question if I'll take it.
Yes,
What year was it?
1917.
There's another one.
Yes, was. David, how old are you?
I should be 75 at the end of August. So I'm 7 times older than most of you.
Come on, here's another one.
We'll take one question of the girls. Yes?
Yes.
Samia?
Mr. David Hacker, where was it
Sorry, can you repeat? Samia, can you say it loudly, please? Say it again. David Hacker.
Well, I'm afraid I didn't hear the question. I'm going to say to you all, please, this is something you can all learn tonight today. Vi speaks very well, and I have a fairly powerful voice. Learn to project your voice slowly and project it forward so that people at the back can hear what's going on. So that's something to learn from today. Now, I didn't hear that question, so I'm sorry. Could somebody bring the question down?
What was it? Did you hear? Sheffield?
Not here,
I think it's a shame.
She said when David Hacker went to school, did the teacher beat him up or hit him in any kind of way?
Yes.
Repeat
The
it.
answer. When you went to school, did the teachers hit you? Or...
Did they beat me? Yes, I said yes. The answer is yes. They had a rod, and basically you got, if you're very good, you got clouted on the bottom or on the hand. So the answer is yes. And by the way, just to reiterate, I too am a CHOB, a chop, a Cann old boy, as I was. I went to, when I was primary school, junior school, I went to Cann School, which is now Upscombe School.
You
So
must do what you
that was
have
years
to.
ago. We'll worry about this a lot later.
I'd just like to,
Yes, yeah, okay.
not this time.
There is a question attached to this that you're going to get. That is, when you get some, there's only 25 there, so if you've got brothers and sisters, only take one. There is a question which you're going to be asked. There's a picture of a building on the front. There's an invitation to all of you, all your parents, next on the 4th of May. But the question I will ask at some other time. So have a look at the picture which you're given, because there's something very special about it. Okay?
Sheffield.
Okay, that applies to the girls as
I
well.
would like to conclude, if I may. I've been given the privilege.
Boys, everyone face forward and sit properly.
I wanted to say au revoir to you all. Not goodbye, because I would love to see you all again and to hear all your questions and to know your views and opinions and what you're thinking as well. Not just what I'm thinking, what I've done, but I'd like to know what you're all thinking. So I hope there may be another opportunity when we can talk about something else and you can tell me all your views and what you're interested in, because I've been delighted with what I've heard today. Thank you very, very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.